Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating innovation that sits right at the intersection of finance and philanthropy. We're looking at a financial instrument called Cash Waqf Linked Sukuk, or CWLS for short. If you've ever found yourself wondering how a personal, everyday act of charity could literally scale up to build a nation's infrastructure, all while still supporting your local community, well, you are absolutely in the right place. So think about this for a second. How can one single donation fund major state infrastructure, pay for local students' scholarships, and somehow never actually run out? I mean, usually we imagine a donation getting spent and then, it's gone. But what if your donation acted like a boomerang? What if it could do the heavy lifting for both the government and everyday people and then return to you completely intact? That's the exact puzzle we're going to solve today. Okay, let's dive into this. At its core, Cash Waqf Linked Sukuk, or CWLS, is a financial instrument that synergizes Cash Waqf with national development. In simpler terms, it's just a brilliant bridge. It connects the deeply personal act of giving a cash endowment, which is what Cash Waqf is, with the massive macro-scale requirements of state building. It takes the everyday charity of regular individuals and structurally links it to the progress of an entire nation. Now, don't worry if this sounds a bit complex right now. We're going to track what we call the journey of a coin step by step, so this entire financial instrument makes perfect sense. We'll cover 5 areas. 1, the synergy of Waqf in development. 2, the collection and investment phase. 3, building state infrastructure. 4, distributing social benefits. And finally, number 5, the preservation of the Waqf principle. All right, let's jump right into part 1, the synergy of Waqf and development. This is where we look at how the deeply personal act of giving merges with the macro scale of national progress. And this brilliantly illustrates the entire 6-step life cycle of the CWLS mechanism. It's really best to think of it like a highly coordinated relay race of funds, passing from one stakeholder to the next. It begins with collection, then the baton gets passed to investment, then principal utilization, which generates a yield, moving on to benefit distribution, and finally preservation. We're going to zoom in and see exactly how this baton is passed. Moving on to phase 2, the collection and investment phase. This is where our coin actually starts its journey, focusing on how those funds are initially collected and deployed. To really grasp this step, we just need to demystify 2 quick terms. First is the Waqf. The Waqf is just you. You're the donor making a charitable cash donation. You take your funds and you hand the baton to the Nazir. The Nazir, like the Indonesian Waqf Board or BWI, essentially acts as your trusted fund manager. They're the entity legally responsible for receiving and managing your cash waqf. So, simply put, the collection phase is just the Waqf handing their money over to the Nazir. Once the Nazir has collected all those funds, the investment phase officially begins. The Nazir takes this big pool of cash waqf and uses it to purchase state sukuk, specifically SBSN, which are state Sharia securities issued directly by the Ministry of Finance. And this is incredible because this is the exact moment your personal donation suddenly scales up to the national level. It leaves your local community and enters the massive national economic engine, entirely and securely backed by the government. Which brings us to part 3, building state infrastructure. This is where the government steps into our relay race, and the true macro scale of the impact becomes totally visible. See, when the Ministry of Finance issues that sukuk and receives the funds from the Nazir, they don't just sit on a giant pile of cash. Not at all. The government puts that principal money directly to work. According to the source material, they use it to finance major state projects. We're talking about building the nation's bridges, paving highways, and funding vital public services. Your charitable endowment is out there, right now, actively at work, building the facilities that serve the entire nation. Let's shift gears to the climax of our story in part 4, distributing social benefits. This is the dual impact phase, where we look at the grassroots impact happening at the exact same time the government is using the principle. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it shows the absolute magic of the CWLS system. It's all about that dual impact. On the left, the state uses the principle for major infrastructure, but simultaneously, on the right, the government pays regular coupons or yields straight back to the Nazir. So the government gets the massive funding it needs to build a country, and the Nazir secures a guaranteed, steady stream of income. And what does the Nazir do with all those regular coupon payments? Well, this is where the human element comes to the forefront. They use those funds for real-world, grassroots social programs. Our sources highlight that these yields are actively paying for things like local educational scholarships, crucial renovations for madrasas, and all sorts of other amazing community initiatives. So while the bulk of your donation is out there building national bridges, the profit generated from it is putting a kid through school or fixing up a local classroom. It is literally an amazing synergy of macro development and micro charity. And finally, we arrive at the grand finale of our journey, Part 5, Preservation of Waqf Principle. This is where the boomerang returns, ensuring the ultimate sustainability of your original donation. So the crucial point is what happens when the state sukuk finally reaches its maturity date. The cycle completes itself. The government takes the exact principal amount they initially received and they return it completely intact to the Nazir. Remember our boomerang analogy from the beginning? The funds went out, they built major infrastructure, they generated yields that paid for local scholarships, and now 100% of that original donation comes back whole. It's completely ready to start that incredible cycle of good all over again. I really want to leave you with this provocative thought. If your charity could build a nation's infrastructure, fund local education, and never ever diminish in value, how would that change the way you give today? Cash Way Off linked sukuk absolutely proves that philanthropy doesn't have to just be a one-off transaction. It can literally be a sustainable national-scale engine for continuous, unending good. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this leaves you awestruck by the power of sustainable philanthropy.